All right, good morning everybody and welcome. It's just after 9 o'clock and after a slight technical glitch, which we may have a few of today because I understand that I am the first live stream meeting with our new system. I'd like to welcome everybody in the chamber and those online to today's Performance Audit and Risk Committee, and I'll just start by asking if there are any apologies. No, if not, I'd like to also just now please take a moment to reflect on and remember our colleague Jim. Jim has been at every Performance Audit and Risk Committee that I've been at, both as a member and as a chair, and I have really valued his input and enjoyed his company. I think that the PAR committee meetings and council meetings going forward, whilst may be significantly shorter, will be worse for Jim's lack of presence, and so I'd just like to take a moment now, please, for us all just to remember and reflect on Jim. Thank you, and you'll see as the camera moves around today, we've got a bit of a tribute in the room for him, so he's certainly the rose between two thorns today. I'd just like to start by calling out if there are any declarations of interest. Graham, and for those of you who I'm sure you've all met Graham, our independent member of the PAR.
Thank you. It's come to my attention that in my role at Wanganui District Council, we have a situation where there is a common tenant at the airport being there, so I need to declare that I will step away from any matters within the agenda associated with the airport or where the interests of the common tenant are being discussed.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that. Sven.
Yeah, and likewise with my Euroclub involvement, I'll take part in discussion, but I won't be voting on any airport matters.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. We'll note both of those. Excellent. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, confirmation of public minutes. Do I have any questions or feedback? Councillor Ryan, Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Just a couple of spelling and grammatical errors that I feel need to be noted.
You picked up the gauntlet.
I will pass on to Ellie.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, could I ask somebody move that we receive the minutes? Moved by Councillor McCone, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ryan. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you, that's carried. And we'll now move on to agenda item 5, which I believe is reports from the Chief Executive. We'll start with 5.1, the Head Start Risk Assessment. Richard, are you going to open that on behalf of Joe? And thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Just while Ken sets up, Ken's got a great paper today to take us through some of the considerations in the Head Start program. As we're all aware, it's happening quite quickly and comes with a great deal of uncertainty, and so Ken's paper tackles some of the risk management aspects of that. Thank you. Over to you, Ken.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ken. I'm the Risk Assurance Advisor for Council. The purpose of this report is to give Council a clear risk view of the Head Start pathway. This assessment was prepared to provide greater visibility of Head Start within Council's risk profile and to support governance oversight as the proposal develops and as we progress. I just want to emphasize that this is not an options assessment. It does not recommend whether Waitaki should align with any negotiated model. The purpose is to assess Council's current exposure, key vulnerabilities, current controls, scenario triggers, and the assurance work needed before further commitment. Overall, Head Start remains a high residual exposure for Council. The Council resolution gave us a clearer direction and strengthens Council's ability to participate in shaping the outcome, but it does not reduce any underlying risk by itself. The rating remains high as Council is operating in a compressed time frame while several major settings remain uncertain. These include central government approval, legislation, partner council alignment, Waihimo and Southern District implications, financial and transition impacts, treaty and iwi considerations, workforce capacity, service continuity, any data qualities, and community confidence. For Waitaki, this is more complex than structural reform question alone. Waitaki sits across Otago and Canterbury, with the Waitaki River forming the boundary between these two regions. Council currently works with both Otago Regional Council and Environment Canterbury. This means Head Start raises questions about local representation, community identity, catchment management, flood management, our assets, service continuity, rates equity, Mana-Whenua relationships, and Council's ability to keep delivering while reform work continues. The assessment groups our exposure into 4 practical lenses. The first is governance and decision evidence. This is about whether Council has enough evidence, legal confidence, any clear assumptions, and decision criteria and governance checkpoints to make defensible decisions under the tight timeframes. The next would be regional alignment and local voice. This is about whether Waitaki's local voice, community identity, Waihimo and Southern District interests, Mana-Whenua relationships, and regional functions can be protected in any future model. The third is financial and planning exposure. This covers transition costs, operational costs, service harmonization, assets and liability allocation, Southern Waters interdependencies, what it will impact our rates, and the long-term plan assumptions. The fourth is delivery and transition resilience. Head Start is another major reform stream alongside BAU, the long-term plan and annual planning, and any planning reform and our district plan work. This creates pressure on staff capacity, critical roles, service continuity, asset stewardship, and implementation readiness. Council do have an active control environment. Current controls include ELT monitoring, regional engagement, CE updates, asset management, iwi engagement, legal and compliance processes, staff communication, and existing regional relationships. However, many of these controls are still monitoring, coordinating, planning, or relationship controls. They help Council stay informed and organized, but they do not yet fully reduce the exposure. A key scenario identified in the assessment is that Waitaki may not be included in any approved Head Start proposal. If that happens, Waitaki would enter the compulsory post-2028 backstop process. Government has not yet confirmed the precise model for that process, so non-approval changes the pathway rather than removing the reform exposure. That is why proposal viability and central government approval are critical dependencies. The second critical dependency is partner alignment. Waitaki cannot deliver the preferred model alone. If Waimate, Mackenzie, Timaru, or any wider participant, Council does not have support, the same geography, timing, or reform pathway, the proposal may need to be redesigned. If no viable partner grouping or accepted alternative pathway is available, Waitaki may lose the opportunity to progress through Head Start and instead move into the later backstop process. The third insight is that financial and transition assumptions remain unproven. Any expected efficiencies or savings should be treated cautiously until transition costs, assets and liability allocations, service harmonization, and future operating model impacts are tested. So at this stage, what can Council realistically do? At this stage, Council cannot remove all uncertainty. Council does not control every decision that will shape the final reform pathway, but Council can shape, test, document, and monitor the proposal. It can stay engaged with partner councils while being careful not to overcommit before the evidence is mature. The conclusion is that Head Start is both a strategic opportunity and a significant exposure for Council. Early engagement may help protect local influence, but it does not reduce the risk by itself. The prudent position is to retain the residual rating as high, continue monitoring the exposure, and revisit the rating only when stronger evidence is available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. It's certainly a very thorough risk assessment. I'll hand over to the Mayor maybe for some initial comment.
Thank you, and I really do appreciate this work, because I think no matter what, we can't remove the risk around this conversation because it's real and it's there. But every time we're making decisions, that does help clarify some of the situation. But certainly, we would hope that after the Head Start proposal timeframes, we do move into a more data-driven and hopefully a bit more time around that data-driven kind of decision-making, because I think it's been extremely light on that database decision-making, which is understandable in the timeframes. Just to clarify on a few things, and this seems a little bit self-serving, but around the updates from the CE, I think we need to keep through the mayoral and CE updates, because they're certainly coming from both angles. So if we can update on that one. There was a few areas in this, and it'll be clearer this week anyway, where Ashburton could have been named as a potential through the work, but I think don't rush off and change a whole lot of things, because more will be known on Wednesday as to whether or not Ashburton are part of the mix wanting to look south, or whether they look at some other options, but certainly are part of that conversation. Timaru's decision that they made last week did include Waitaki into the mix, so I think in the Mackenzie, Waimati, Timaru, Waitaki discussion, we're all operating in the willing partner space, which has just stepped us one very, very small step down in the risk space, where I think we have got a willing grouping, and the next stage will be this week we will get an early draft of our Head Start proposal with an intention, and there's a meeting in all the councillors' diaries, and that will be live streamed on Friday afternoon for a decision-making element as to whether or not we can pass a Head Start proposal. So just making sure everyone is clear on that, and hopefully we will get there early enough that if we've got any concerns, we can sort of beat that around with the other councils. This was all based essentially on a meeting we had that all councillors from all 5 councils were invited to on Wednesday last week in Timaru. Very high level, but just really concentrating on the fact that we all felt the importance was in that local voice side of things, and very much wanting to be data driven. And I think what we were really trying to get to, and there seemed to be a willingness in the room, was that there's no council that ends up worse off, and that we all try and move this into a positive space where we all do benefit from it. So we don't want to have some councils benefiting at the expense of other councils in this mix. Again, thank you for this work, because what I think we can do with this now is, as we do move into the decision-making space, making sure we put this right over the top of any decision and look for where we are trying to actually work through some of the risk and trying to mitigate things as we can, recognising that the early decisions are going to be laden with risk, and very much in that public space as well. How do we keep our community at the table?
Thank you. And so I note in here that August 9 is the next kind of drop. What is it that we have to have on a table at August 9?
So that's the Head Start proposal, and it's supposed to be very high level directional, still very much looking at how we address the 5 main points that the government have put out there as what they're trying to achieve through the simplifying local government space, and that's what our work's done. We've got a contractor that's working across all the 4+1, because Ashburton is still part of the conversations at the moment, but they have yet to make a decision, and so we're very much leaving that as a willing partner conversation. But yeah, essentially this week at the moment we're waiting imminently. I think it's due to be hopefully tomorrow. I haven't had an update whether that's on track or not for the initial Head Start proposal document, and we'll be getting that around councillors as soon as we can, and certainly want to be getting it in the public realm as soon as we can with that as well, so that on Friday when we're discussing it, it doesn't tie us to everything. And I think there's still very much discussions around things like exit ramps and things if we aren't going down the track we want, but we certainly want to head into these conversations with a willingness to make this work, and not be using an exit ramp as or off ramp as an excuse or even a negotiation point. Like, I think that we all want to do this in good faith.
Yeah. France.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, Ken, first of all, thank you for your work. You know, I love risk assessments. And then we start to talk. Look, just following on also what our mayor has just said, I do believe there is one component within your risk assessment that I think is a little bit overlooked or doesn't get enough application in terms of, you know, is the risk high or very high? You know, on page 4 you put a very high risk. And that component is the actual council of elected members. I think that in the end, Head Start is about the people that we represent, and we are their representatives, and for them. And I believe that decision-making by elected members is a control point against risk. And I get the feeling, and this is just my personal view, that that is somewhat lacking in your document. And I don't know what the purpose of this document is, whether this eventually goes to council, but I'm sure this is the first one, and you're probably going to make other ones. I really would like to ask you to keep that in mind, because in the end, although the ultimate decision will be made by some people there in Wellington, I'm sure in between there, we also have a control over that on what we decide. And I think that is something that I really would like you to keep in mind, in the back of your mind. The other thing is that I was a little bit put out, and our mayor has already mentioned it, as in, you know, the chief executive gets a mention as in to inform councillors and the council in general. But our mayor has been at all these meetings, has been to all these mayor forums, and doesn't even get a mention in your document. So just be careful, because, you know, I know that she can be... she can wield a very big stick if she wants to. I'm sure this was not intentional, but I think we need to recognise that our mayor and the chief executive have communicated extremely well, and we expect them to keep doing that. At the same token, us as representative members of our wards are also directly involved with this whole process. You know, look at last Wednesday, you know, a bunch of us went off to Timaru to take part in all that. So please keep in mind that not to underestimate the control against risk that us as elected members also have, because I do feel that's a little bit missing in your assessment. The only other question that I've got actually is the layout in the appendix, you know, of all the risks there. Is that a new layout that I have to get used to, or you know, because yeah, I'm getting old and I don't like change. But if you, is that the new layout, Ken? We have to get used to.
So this is the same format that we get risk assessments coming through to the PAR and normally, right, Ken? Similar. So not the same. Is there a reason for the deviation?
Not in particular. Not in particular. I just thought that when I created the report, to embed the risk assessment itself on the report and highlight and just highlight it. And
okay. So I guess, Franz, the key driver was that we noted a PAR or two ago that Head Start was absolutely a risk for the council, and as such we needed to get it onto the risk register, and Graham provided Ken with a template that he's been using at other councils for creating that. So this is really the first draft of this risk that's coming through. I think you've got some great feedback from Franz about making sure that we get the mayor in there as a control, and also we'll build in that control where councillors as representative of their wards and as voting members play a key control in making sure that the Head Start risk is minimised for the community. So that's really great feedback. Thank you, and I can work with Ken on getting that in there. I think, John, you were next cab off the rank, and then we'll go to Jody.
Thank you, Ken. Franz has already pretty much said what I was going to say anyway, but I'm not a great fan of risk. I'd rather get on and get things done and have a list of what we need to prioritise. I would suggest, Ken, that we put in there, you know, the biggest risk we've got is not doing anything. the government has said they'll do it for us if we don't. So we've covered that off, and we will know which direction we're going by the 9th of August or the middle of September when they say well, you can or you can't, because we can make the decision, but the ultimate decision will be made by central government, which makes it hard when you do a risk assessment because the rules change. But I wonder if we should actually be focusing on the financial part of it, and that ECAN rates will eventually become part of the Waitaki district rates, as will the ORC. And our biggest problem is cash flow. So if there's a glitch in our cash flow while those two merge or the systems merge, what have we got in place to ensure that we don't put ourselves in deep trouble? It would be one comment. The other thing I wonder that we should be looking at is our services for the public. Civil Defence runs for the Otago region. St John's runs for the Otago region. The police run for the Otago region. Our hospital services are southern. Our water services are going south, yet we're going to be working in the north. You know, have we got something in place or some thoughts in place to actually protect those services or start a system where we can stand this up? I think, you know, there is an opportunity that Ashburton may come and it may not, but we don't know that. We do know the other three are happy with where we are at the moment. So working on 4 is fine, working on 5, if they come on board, is 5. But I think you've got to work with what you've got at the moment.
Thank you. Mel, you had some feedback?
Yeah, just a quick response on the alignment side of things, because you did write, Councillor McCona, around a lot of our services are provided out of Dunedin or in the southern sort of region, and I guess the first portion of the Head Start or the simplifying local government is not going to solve that, but I would like to think that we're highlighting that kind of thing within our Head Start proposal to say that I think there needs to be continued conversations with the central government, because once Waitaki does land clearly in one region, then I would like to think that that gets looked at as the way we can simplify everything that happens within Waitaki, and so at a national level that our different services that are passed down to Waitaki are done within that same region. So I think there's part B to what simplifying local government is, and that's simplifying in general, probably governance. And so I think we need to keep that highlighted and keep it at the table the whole way through, and it's certainly the conversations I've been having with any ministers I've been able to get in the ear of, because they need to recognise that nothing's going to be simplified if Waitaki chooses a direction and then we still have everything piecemeal, looking south and looking north, and Timaru was struggling with the same issues as well.
I hadn't thought about that. All of your other essential services and civil defences are all like aligned to the south, and so the flow-on effects. I guess Waitaki's in quite an interesting position because we do have that foot in both camps, which makes us even more unique and special. Sven.
Yeah, I'd echo what John said. The government said, well, if we don't do it, they'll do it for us. But I think it's also worth highlighting they're going to do it for us anyway. It's just that we get a bit of a brainstorming session first. And I think I do agree with Ken's assessment there. It's still still a high risk, because the quality of our proposal will be key, and we're only sort of 1/4 or 1/5 of the input into the proposal. So I think that should be high at the very least. I was wondering if there's any consideration to keeping it at very, very high, just given, you know, we actually haven't got much control over any of it apart from trying to feed into the proposal.
That we'll look into that.
Yeah, I think high, very high. It's, you know, potato, much of a muchness at this point in time. But I think the fact, you know, it's important that we get the risk recognised in the risk register. Everybody's aware of it in any case, and I think Ken's done a good job documenting a draft of it. But we can pick up on some of the feedback that we've had from both John and Franz and get that included in there, and then, you know, really focus on this proposal and making sure that everybody around the table's got that shared information. Franz, you had another comment, and then we'll go to Dan.
More of a question, actually, Ken, through the chair. Page 20, the paragraph below the table, it mentions a proposed focus group, and possibly that might have been something that maybe that's been discussed in the last meeting where I was an apology for, but can you just expand on that proposed focus group, please?
Yeah, I saw that too, and I think maybe, Mel, you probably know more about this.
That's probably me. I think, and it wasn't going to fit within the Head Start timeframes, but I do think that I'd love to see there be a touch point of some of our local leadership outside of council that can start to build what good looks like. So we've got a bit of a sounding board, and so it's not just council sitting in this conversation alone. This is a big community conversation to be had, and I think the idea of a focus group, and we need to tease out what that means a little bit more and what the membership of it is. But I really want to see, if we do get ourselves into that Head Start space, I want to see that as a touch point stood up, so that whenever we are walking into any meetings around the Head Start and how we set our community up or set our council up in the future, we're looking at it from a whole lot of angles from around the community, and we're actually building something really strong. So for me, it was how do we make this bigger than council? And it's a bit like our panel meetings, just recognising that we've got so many skill sets within Waitaki, and yeah, I think as a council we need to spend a bit of time on getting the look of that right and getting how we make it work right. But I see it as a great one to touch into before we have any meetings, so that we come really prepared with a whole broad view of what we want for Waitaki, and then as those meetings have happened, bring back to those groups so that we can unpack and work out what's going to work for us and what isn't, if that helps.
Thank you. Did you have a supplementary, Franz?
Just one, and it's more of a comment. I think once we actually know how we're going to proceed with a proposal, whether that includes Ashburton or not, I really would like to revisit the risk assessment on the details, because the devil is in the details. And I was actually in two minds to bring up here the electoral reform, or the electoral model, which I think is so important for two reasons. A, it goes towards local representation. Are we going to get it or not? The other thing is, I don't want to see a unitary council with elected members that are going to be filled by political parties, if you know what I mean. I mean, that would just take away everything that we are striving for at the moment. So, but yeah, I was in two minds of whether to bring it up here as something that should be addressed. It probably has to be addressed in details, but I really like to see that happen after we focus on, you know, how is this amalgamation actually going to look like with whoever is going to join.
Thank you. And this is absolutely a live document, so it will continually be updated. It's not a set in stone thing. Dan, you had a comment, and then I'll go to Graham and then John.
I did. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, no, I totally agree with regards to keeping it in the very high risk at this stage. One of the things I do wonder is, do we have a clear sort of pathway with regards to when, as decisions are made, where a pathway and milestones that are reached where we actually readdress those elements of risk, because they are many and varied, and some are going to be more, you know, it'll stay on the radar longer.
Mel.
We will do. We probably don't at the moment. I guess our only real time frame we've got in front of us at the moment around that is the 9th of August, because then there's a decision to be made at central government, and so what we do from there needs to be padded out as soon as we've got an answer. If we're in the backstop or, you know, get our application turned down, we need to bring those councils back to the table and say, are we still proceeding in this direction, and what are our new timeframes? And that's a group discussion. If we step into the simplifying local government space because our Head Start gets approved, then I think we need to be working with the councils involved and central government to work out what our new timeframes are. So we're a wee bit in the dark at the moment, but it will become clearer, possibly not on the 9th of August, I would say in September, when we're supposed to get an answer.
Thank you. Graham.
Through you, Chair, I think the biggest risk you're addressing, because you are willing to move, you're willing to participate, you're willing to be part of a solution. Central government's made it very clear where they wish it to go, and they've made it very clear that either you participate in this or we'll do it to you. My read of it is that if you don't participate, as some councils have chosen, it's going to show an unwillingness to follow the government lead, which will mean that is probably not going to be a great result for the ratepayers because they'll have zero ability to influence what happens. So congratulations on being part of a solution. We're all in a situation we don't know what's happening until it happens. So that means that really there's going to be a completely new risk register needing to happen once we know what it is and what we're dealing with. And that's going to be very operational in many ways as we bring lots of different systems together. We work out what everyone has and where all the pinch points are going to be. To me, one of the biggest risks is the one on page 26, workforce uncertainty and retention. Because there are going to be people and families and situations where they don't have a very low risk tolerance for uncertainty because of mortgages, potentially family commitments, changes in their income streams because of moving into family circumstances or what the spouse to the council member has. And the risk there is that you're potentially the most employable person, and other alternatives are probably going to be some of your prime employees there. So that's going to create a risk of, and I see this at councils across the country, and I do get to see a few of those where there's been staff movement, and one of the reasons is the uncertainty in the environment from the Wisco situation dating back to Three Waters, through the various machinations of that, and people are leaving because they see uncertainty or they don't have confidence that there's a long-term career for them. And the consulting companies and things appear to be going out there and seeing potentially lots of work, and they're going and picking the eyes and making and approaching people. So I see workforce retention and satisfaction as one of the big ones. Funding and resourcing for this. The government wants to make big changes, but how is this going to be funded? This Head Start came with no funding there, so therefore it's being funded by the ratepayer, and it's an unbudgeted expenditure that was dropped on us. That's very sensitive, particularly for this council, with the pressures that you have before you. So we need to go into this with the discussions about, okay, so you want this to happen, how is it going to get funded, guys? Because on one hand you say you don't want us to be raising rates, but on the other hand you're wanting us to do all this work. So I think that's a key risk that's going to come down the track. And don't overestimate, be too optimistic on the time to see benefit from this. To merge all the systems and processes and stuff behind the scenes could be a 3 to 7 year project, depending where various councils are at with their systems, the alignment, contracts they have in place for back office provision, all sorts of things there, and it's going to take a long time to actually see the benefits of this. Initially, it's probably going to be an increase in costs, would be my prediction on that, having seen a few of these mergers and acquisitions over my career. So, yeah, those are probably the key points, but the first step is being willing to engage, and clearly you've indicated that, and wearing and understanding wearing the moccasins of the people in Wellington who are being ordered by ministers to implement certain things. How would you see the proposal if you were sitting in Wellington with the pressures? So wear the other side's moccasins. And probably the key one is this council's prepared to engage and get on with it. They may not know all the detail at this stage because there's too much uncertainty, but they've expressed a commitment to follow the directions of the minister at this stage in the government. Otherwise, I think you will be the turkey signing off on Christmas, effectively, because you'll have it done to you.
Thank you. Not all positive stories, but great to get your experience. Well, John, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. A lot of it's been said, and I really reinforce what Graham's just saying. To me, at the moment, it's the unknown cost of something's going to happen, and we're just not set up for that cost at the moment. We should be well aware of it. And the second part, to be well aware of it, even the basics, 1 and 1 make 2, get the continuity system so that we can seamlessly go across. And being proactive is far more positive than being reactive. So we lead and show this is where we're sitting at the moment. It's far better than saying, what are you guys doing, and we'll come along afterwards. That's where the cost comes in. So you've got to lead your way. And as Graham also said, we've done it, so let's start leading it.
Yep. Stan, did you have a comment? And we'll close it.
Yeah, hopefully in that early part of the detailed design, we can start getting a bit of what we'd like. At least it'll be plenty of uncertainty right up until the government tells us what's happening, but at least, like you say, we're getting a crack at shaping it. It's also probably worth highlighting that without the risk, you don't get the reward too. It's a lot of these risks, like for example, the risks that the reform may alter future functions is exactly the point. That's also the reward, is that we alter the future functions so we can get the benefit of them too. So it's probably worth framing that today's session is all about risk, so it will seem a bit more negative on something that also has the potential to be very positive.
Yes, there's just a daunting wall of work to get there. Rebecca?
Thank you. I think Graham raised a good point on, I guess, the financial and financial impacts of us stepping into this process and the time that that's going to take. But I wonder, Mayor Tavendale, whether you could possibly touch on, there's been a lot of discussions with MCERT when they've said, actually, you need to explicitly be putting that in your proposal and really highlighting that. And so I'm assuming that work is that's being looked at in terms of what we can be saying.
Certainly something when it comes to the detail we need to make sure is in there. Agree with you on that one. And the early indications were, for the ones that headed into the Head Start proposal, that there might be more opportunity for that help. So not just saying, hey, this is a problem, but identifying where they can be of assistance. I think that comes in many forms, whether it's specialist support and trying to stand up what this means financially across all the councils. There's a few different pieces of work that they could potentially help us with, and so that's some of the detail they have sort of put out there as examples. So we need to work out what it is we're asking for, but it probably can be higher level for a start, and just identifying that we are going to struggle when it's unbudgeted expenditure in front of us, and very much as well, I think there's other savings or options in front of us around things like representation reviews and some of the other legislative works we have to do in the next wee while we're also stepping up something where we know the future will change. So there's some pieces of work that may not make sense. So if there is an ability to pause some of those work streams through this process, and I think only the ones that step into the Head Start proposal are going to have that ability, we need to make sure we capitalise on that.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I don't see any more hands up. I think this has been a really valuable discussion. Thank you, Ken, for all of the work that you've put into drafting this up. You've had some good feedback today that we'll be able to work on going forward, and I look forward to where we get to on the 9th and all that's involved. So on that, could I ask somebody move that we receive the risk register? Moved by Mayor Tavendale, seconded by Councillor McCone. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried, and thank you, Ken, for the work that you've done. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.2, the health and safety update, and Teresa, I invite you to the floor. Who, you want to introduce this?
Thanks. Yeah. So it's a similar format to our last update, just a summary of the incidents and near misses that we've had over the last quarter, and a general update.
And anything, I mean, obviously the occupational violence and aggression working near the public is something that is pretty confronting. I note there was also, and I've not in my time as a PAR chair read about an employee falling while they're removing a goat. So, I mean, it brings up a lot of questions, but perhaps not specifically for the PAR today. But let's open it up for the floor for their discussion and feedback. France?
Teresa, I'm not trying to be too pedantic here, but page 32 on the psychosocial harm, it says employee experienced panic attack after being assigned an emergency management role without, and then the keyword says requested. I wonder whether that is required, because those are two completely different words. And I wonder whether that requested should be required.
Yes, that's probably the case. Sorry. Good catch.
No?
And I, just following up on that, I had the same thing. How do we end up in a situation where we ask somebody to do something that they're not trained for? Like, I highlighted that as a concern.
So we with Otago, we're undergoing training all the time around civil defence. So it's quite extensive training, and there's a series of training both on how to respond and the roles that are involved, as well as how to use the software D4H. So it just might be that they weren't quite at that point of the training that they felt comfortable. It does note as well in the item that there's stress as well involved in that, and I think people were all feeling different levels of stress during that event, and that's also what came through.
Thank you. Mick.
I think it probably does highlight too that in the future around a CDE, and whether it's looking north or looking south, that there's going to be an increased requirement for us to have trained staff to carry out these activities at a time when we're also losing a lot of staff around things like our Three Waters program. And so there's going to be a lot more people that don't necessarily put their hands up as willingly to step into these roles, because we just do not have the personnel in an emergency event. And so there's a lot tied up in that, and I think that we just need to, as governance, be aware of the numbers of people it takes to actually carry out an emergency event and to step up the response to that, and what that actually means for workloads and things like that as well, because obviously if you're taking someone out of their work to do that and they've got other time frames, there's a huge amount in that. So it's really helpful for us to understand, and also for us to understand with the legislation that's coming through in the CDM space, that's actually going to put more onus on councils and create even more stress. So we just probably need to, it's quite good to highlight this, because there's probably a wee bit of a deep dive we need to do at some stage when we understand that legislation a little bit more, to understand what the implications are, because I feel like they're going to be a lot more than we realise.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening, the additional amount of work and pressure that our people could potentially come under. Graham, did you have some feedback?
Thank you. In all the Audit and Risk Committees I've been in, I've never seen anything about a goat either. Just so you don't feel left out. That was a new one for me. Looking at the water-related risks, this is, I guess, always a high-risk area when you're operating aquatic facilities. And could I suggest that maybe you do some benchmarking about your statistics against others? And I could suggest the Haranui District Council with the Hamner Springs Committee there, trying to get their data, because I know that they present reports on this. And Hastings, which I'm also on, they have Splash Planet, and I know that we get statistics there. That would then give up, and you could get a template to model and do comparatives, at least against a couple of other pools. There may well be others that you can get, because many councils do offer this, and that'll give us a bit of benchmarking to understand how are we going between there. And just things like redesigning things can make a huge difference. And I'm not familiar and haven't visited your particular facilities there, but for instance at one other council, they redesigned the entry pool into the from the hydroslide, and it cut the number of issues they had by 75%. So there can be design, engineering safety into things just with, can be quite a good idea, and have a is there a communication and a bit of an informal sharing of results and ideas between councils that are operating similar type pool facilities.
John?
Thank you, Teresa, and no offence, but this is a waste of my time. So
I'm sorry, I don't think that that's appropriate.
It's okay.
It's not a waste of anybody's time. Health and safety is kind of important, so I'd prefer you retract that.
Well, I will retract that. But these things, they must be reported to the health and safety part of this system, and we should have there'll be an ongoing. So if things keep appearing, then we should be aware of those. But the day-to-day stuff, I just don't think that I need to know that.
Well, I asked for it to be brought back into the PAR because I think that health and safety is an important component, and I'm especially concerned about the continued occupational violence and aggression that we see happening in the community. And I want to, as PAR chair, it's genuinely important to me that I know that we're doing everything that we possibly can with the resources that we've got to keep our staff safe.
I have no problem that everybody that leaves home should go home in the same way as they left in the morning. I have no problem with that at all, but I think we've got far more bigger fish to fry in that system.
I'm happy to put 15 minutes of my time every quarter into this. Let's have a no.
And I guess just a reminder that our CE has legal obligations in this space, and we have legal obligations in this space, and need to have made sure we have a sound understanding and are taking appropriate action where needed. So while I take your point, and I think it's more on a high level kind of issue of it, the practicalities is we need to have this in front of us.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And maybe just, I guess, to help address some of Councillor McCone's queries, I think, and I've raised it before, is whether there's an opportunity to include in this, like whether there are any sort of emerging trends or reoccurring issues, because, it's, you've got the numbers in front of you, but it doesn't really mean anything until you're sort of, comparing and maybe alongside like the benchmarking process. The only other question I had was, does the blood splatter outside council's entrance as a biological exposure, is that captured in whatever was the cause of the blood splatter anywhere else, or do you have any other detail on that?
This is Adele, who is our new health and safety advisor, so she's here for detail like this.
No, we were just notified there was blood splatter outside. There was no cameras showing to that spot, so we don't know what the cause was, but I think it's just a bird that flew into the pillar maybe. We don't know. It could have been a fight over the weekend. We don't really know.
That's okay. Sven, did you have something?
Yeah, picking up on the legal side of things, and also what Graham was talking about making improvements based off this. I think this is important for improving things. And on that note, I was just wondering if we could get a bit of a note about what's changed as a result of these, what we've learned from each one as well. A couple of specific questions I had, and I'm sure they've been addressed, but things like the fast closing lift door that caught somebody, has that been slowed down, things like that. And also sort of thinking a bit more widely about the environments that they happen in, like the beach road, somebody got caught in a wire there. We'll put up signs for the wire. We also, while we put up a sign, did we also include the cliff face in that, and just things like that as well.
Sorry, I was just going to, and I apologise to Councillor Ryan, the trend information. So what I'll do is I'll circulate the trend information, and which I was going to do anyway, and I'll ensure that the next report includes that trend analysis, and we'll have a follow-on for actions, where there's a meaningful change, not for everything obviously, but meaningful change, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think the good feedback here is we can probably lift the report up a level in terms of its detail, and then just have a bit of a focus on the trend, and then everybody will feel like they're well informed. Dan.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks Teresa. Yeah, I mean, that could be simply done by just another column, this period, last period, and that way we've got a fairly indication, and maybe even a year to date could be useful, just as an eyeball comparison.
Perfect, thank you. Franz, did you have your hand up before?
I did. Just picking up on Councillor McCone's comments. No, I disagree with it. I think it's good to have this brought in front of us and discuss, even if it is just for declaration. Yeah, I'll buy the beers tonight, John, don't worry. But I think, as I said before, there's a big difference between requested and required. That this is going to a third party, and we need to be clear with what we are actually saying. So on that, on the same page, or page 32, working near or with the public, if I read that in first instance, that a child struck by a basketball at a council venue, then I had to think about it for a while, because if there's a whole group of kids there at the event centre playing a basketball game, they're all going to be hit by this basketball sooner or later. But I assume that this is a child outside the actual game itself, or have I jumped to a conclusion there?
No, it was a child walking, well, outside the game, but walking around.
Walking in there, so yeah, so it is just how you word it. The other thing is, as Councillor Thelding has already said, a fast closing lift door. This, to me, this lift door closes all of a sudden by its own very fast, or is it a normal operating lift door that for some reason they needed more time to get in? There's a total different story to a door that suddenly closes, or somebody that was just slow getting in there. So therefore, I think it is important that these things do come to us or anybody and gets discussed, and just make sure that we've got the terminology right, because this is going to a third party, and they will probably ask the same question and create more work for you.
Thank you. Good feedback, work in progress. Tidy it up. Sven?
Yeah, the other thing that jumps out at me looking at these is which ones were more serious or less serious in terms of impact, and therefore risk. And the one with the going back to the water treatment chemicals, I'd be quite keen to have a look at that report when it's done. You can redact the details to protect privacy and things, but it'd be really good to have a look at that if possible.
Thank you. Dan?
Just going back to the lift thing, as a former lift engineer, yeah, I know, man of very limited talents. There are protection devices in place, so usually door edge sensors and things, so that shouldn't happen. So I would actually raise that with the people who are doing the maintenance, just in case there's an issue there.
The things we learn about each other. Thank you. Is there any other feedback or comment on the health and safety report? No, look, I think there's been some really useful feedback that you've got. We can pick up on some bits and pieces, and when it comes along next time, it'll be even better and even more valuable use of people's time than it currently is now. So thank you. Could I ask somebody move that we receive the report? Moved by Deputy Mayor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Thelding. All those in favour? Against? Thank you very much. That's carried. And thank you both. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.3, and that's the Oamaru Airport Health and Safety Risk Update. And Matthew.
Mr. Chair, I'll just step out.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mayor Tavendale?
If I can just flag, so I think that there's portions of this here for commercial sensitivity we're best to have the discussions on in private. So moving this report conversation into public excluded. That being said, there's a fair bit here that is in the public realm that's probably quite comfortable to be discussed in the public realm. So I guess I'll throw to you, Mr. Sisson, around just being able to navigate that, and do feel free to say if it's public or commercially sensitive, or identifying of people that maybe we're better to move that conversation into public excluded space.
Thank you, and Ali will note that we'll have a specific section in public excluded for us to just speak to what Matthew would like to outside of the public session. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, through the chair. Second time we've done this report, I've tried to keep a format so the information all sort of stays the same. Happy for feedback on anything else you'd like to know for this report. But look, there's a chart there that shows, incidents, hazards and wildlife, just like last time. I've kept a couple of previous quarters in for a bit of trend history. Sort of trending about the same. If we go down a bit further to the trend analysis, you'll see this quarter we've had quite an increase in wildlife observations. and quite a substantial equipment and asset condition issue. Basically, it's attributing to the weather. Our lighting, so we've had 38% of our problems have been attributed to lighting failures for the runway lights. What we're finding is when the wet weather and cold weather, we're having the asset is taking it a bit personally, and you know, that's obviously coming at an expense. Now that is related to its age. I believe these lights were possible, the cables are possibly installed back in the 60s or 70s, so yeah, they are quite old.
So, Matt, can you talk me through that? So, if I look at the table of hazards that are reported,
Yep.
so on May, incident accident reports we had, May, July, we had 3.
Yep.
Is the trend analysis saying that 38% of those 3 incidents were related? It's not saying that 38% of the time the lights are failing.
No. So I had in total 16 reports for the quarter.
Yeah.
Okay. Of that, so half of them were attributed to asset conditions. Of those of those reports just for asset conditions, 40% of it was lighting failure. So the major failures for our assets has been lighting failures.
Just a question on that, because I see you're talking about $1,500 a month that we're dealing with just responding to that. What kind of cost are we looking at for the full replacement?
So we have in the LTP for 2 years' time $800 and something thousand to replace it. So yeah, at the moment it's cheaper for us to keep fixing them. It can range between it's an average of 1,500. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. But the risk is a sudden and quick failure. The cables in the ground are direct buried, so there's no ducting or anything around them. They've been there, as I say, from the 60s or 70s. And we did have the cables tested when I first started to see what the condition was like, and they were pretty borderline. So yeah, going forward there are options. There's replacing watts like for like, or there is solar options. So they all have their benefits and stuff. So but that's obviously for further down the track. But yeah, yep.
Sven? Sorry, Mel, did you have a further?
I just guess for us it's helpful, because I get what you're saying around it's cheaper to fix, but there is an ultimate, after a while, how much you've sunk into something of patching up. Like I sort of look at that as approximately $18,000 a year. What would finance costs look like for servicing a $800,000 loan? I'm not expecting you to answer that today, but it's just probably like us understanding how much we're investing now, because we're still going to need to invest at some stage in paying off a loan around that piece of equipment.
So there's 2 parts to it. The things we're replacing are all above ground. So it's light bulbs and light fittings and issues like that. There's 2 components to the system that we can't get to or can't fix anymore. One of those is the cables under the ground. If one of those cables was to fail, some of those cables are 2 kilometres long, and they're buried 800 mil underground. The other one is the transformers, which power it all, and I'm sure Noah had them on his ark, put it that way. But so a failure of those 2 components is where the risk sits. The light bulb changes and stuff like that, that's continuing above ground.
So that sort of 1,500 is ongoing and will continue to be ongoing, and is independent of the sort of 800k spend that we're looking at in the 27-28 LTP.
That's correct. Yeah.
Sven, did you have a question, and then we'll go to Dan and then John?
Yeah, I've been doing a bit of night flying lately, and seeing the amount of work going into them as different bulbs are being replaced. So thank you for that. Being based at the airport, I'm quite aware of the fragility of the system. It's been talked about for a couple of years. I wonder, until we do get round to getting the gorse out of our pockets and replacing it, should we have a NOTAM or something on the plate for a bit, maybe to suggest that it might be a good idea to have an alternate, and normally you'd leave that to the basic rules, but there is this, there might be perhaps more reliance placed on these out of an assumption.
It's a bit of a hard one because look, any airport can have the same issue. Timaru can have the same issue. Dunedin, like Auckland's lights could turn off just like that. So you're sort of predicting the unpredictable. But look, we keep them. There is a minimum standard of how many lights we can have out in combinations, and so we monitor that. We don't fix a light if it blows straight away. There's not a requirement to. So we can group them to a certain point and then call in the electrician and get them fixed all at once. So you are allowed some failures of bulbs and still to operate. So yeah.
Through the chair, just a question, Matt. At which point, with regards to failure, do we then have to cease operations or have absolutely zero night flying?
So when it fails is when you stop. We can still continue to operate. It's just we can't offer night flights or night flying. The biggest risk could potentially be a medical flight, but that's what they have backups as well, like the helicopters and stuff to reassess. So yeah.
So just further on that, at which point you said when some go out, you can still carry on. What is the threshold? How many do you have to have operating in order for?
Oh, look, it's like, for an example, the threshold lights on the end of the runway, you're allowed 2 of them out, but not next to each other. And same with the side lights, you're allowed maybe 3 out and no more than 2 together. And so there's all these different combinations that are written down that we have to abide by. Yeah.
Presumably, if it's a cable failure, that could be just everything goes.
That would be everything. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, John.
Thanks for this, Matt. Just a question as far as the cable failure goes. If it does fail, how much of that will actually have to go through the runway as part of that renewing the cable? I'm assuming that's which part is done. And I concur with our mayor that at some stage it may be better to pay the interest than pay the repair bill. That numbers could work out. The second part of that was on your graph on page 34 with the incidents and everything else. Were the hazards identified that caused the incidents or vice versa? So I'm looking at May and July where there was 3 incidents and 7 hazards identified. And I'm assuming that the wildlife is particularly birds more than anything else.
Yeah. So, no, the hazards identified are not from an incident happening. It's separate. If an incident happens, it's an incident. If we identify a hazard, then it's something separate again. So, yeah. So I'll carry on with that. So airport, obviously I've mentioned there's an incident with CAA, that is with CAA at the moment. So I won't sort of go too deep into that. One thing that is becoming apparent is, we are an unattended aerodrome. I touched on it in my previous report that when, we see a difference when we're not there. So, unattended aerodromes, most aerodromes actually install cameras and have camera oversight. So it's something I'd like to look at the future, probably putting into the LTP. And put, say, half a dozen cameras at the airport so we can use it for safety, movements, the multi-purpose, but keeping that oversight, because I'm, not always there to keep an eye on things.
Thank you. Sven.
The camera's pretty common around airports around the country, and we've also had various generations of them out there too. To maximise the safety benefit, would we be able to look into an option of having them set up as a webcam on the airport webpage? It's really useful for aircraft to be able to look up cameras around around the country at various destinations and alternate destinations to see what the weather's doing on certain days when it might be a bit 50-50.
I'd have to talk to IT about that because obviously there's the IT camera policy as well to consider. But I am aware that Met Service wish to put 1 or 2 cameras up at the airport for that reason. So, yeah.
Thank you. Franz?
Yeah, the thing that comes to my mind when you start talking about cameras is in what sort of quality are you actually after? I mean, are you just looking at something you can see the movements, or you can recognise probably the plane's registration number, or are we talking about really high tech? Because for $600-700 you can buy a pretty good quality camera and put them on Wi-Fi, and you can put them on a web page and all that. Or are we talking about here state of the art? Probably a couple of $1,000s per camera. What are we? I think it boils down to is what you're actually trying to achieve. Get a general picture of what is there, or is it the surveillance role that you're looking for with your camera?
Sort of after a general clear picture. Previously, I've used the cameras along with the audio recordings that we have to build a picture of something that's happened, or just to generally monitor at night. So I have had it priced for 5 cameras based off the top of the control tower, and yeah, very, very reasonable. So not your cheap camera, not your expensive camera, just that something in between. Yeah.
And I assume that's something you would bring along for approval.
Yeah, I can either do it separately or I can put it through the LP2 at whatever's best.
Well, Paul, would depend on the magnitude as to where it went.
That's correct. But I think it probably better bundled up as a suite of projects in relation to the airport and its operations.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Is there any other questions of Matt while we're in the public session? Right. All right. Thank you, Matt. I'll ask if somebody moves that we receive this report. Moved by Councillor Fowling, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ryan. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. That's carried, and we'll see you back in a little bit for the public excluded, Matt. Thank you. It's nearly 10 past. We've got a break scheduled in for 10:20. Do you want to take that break now, and then we can move into the finance section afterwards? All right. Yep, so we'll take a break now for 15-20 minutes and come back. Thank you to all those line. We'll be back very soon around 10:30. And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us and for those online. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.4, which is the Treasury Report for Q4 to 30 June 2026. And I'll invite Amanda and Paul to speak to this.
Okay, so this is the Treasury Report for the full year to 30 June 2026. And it highlights the actual results against budget and prior year. So it's really talking about the investments, our cash, our loans to other entities, and on the other side of it, our term borrowings. They're all pretty much sitting as budgeted. There is slightly higher cash than we budgeted to have. It's quite hard to get that spot on. Investments in other entities are higher because of our GFA borrowing, and loans to other entities slightly higher because of a couple that we've just renegotiated terms that were supposed to be repaid at 30 June 26, but now extended longer. And in terms of our borrowings, we haven't actually borrowed since before Christmas, but our debt is sitting at 91.4 against a budget of 93.6. So there's a lot of detail. I've added a bit of extra information because it's the full year report, so hopefully there's enough in there to explain where everything's sitting.
Thank you, and I'll open it up to the floor for questions and comments. Sven.
I was just wondering on the table with the LGFA borrowings on page 42, there's a significant underspend on the roading there, and I have noticed both perception and also actual scores for the roading is sort of going backwards a wee, but I was wondering what's the bottleneck on the ability to spend that capital there.
So the two main variances for roading, one was a resilience project that was cancelled quite early in the financial year. So that was cancelled because we no longer got the funding for it. And just bearing in mind here that the debt it's around about 50% of the project. The rest of it we get 57% is NZTA funded. So the remainder of the project was supposed to be debt funded. So there's that one that didn't go ahead, didn't get the NZTA funding, won't be happening. And then another couple of quite material projects were carried forward into the 2027 budget. And with the NZTA funding, that's over 3 years. So those projects, those carry forwards and the related funding have also been carried forward to 2027.
Thank you. And just on that same table, there's another three, the waste management minimisation, the property and the other borrowing, all over the budgeted amounts. And I was wondering what the explanations for those were.
So we talk about the grants funding quite a bit more in the next report, the financial report. So for the events centre, we have borrowed higher than we expected to, so that is why that one's over budget. Property, there was a couple of big projects that have been transferred into 2027 or later years, so they haven't gone ahead. And then other borrowing, we expected, what is that to do with? I might have to come back to you on that one to see exactly what specific projects are related, but it'll be to do with some, in our projects listing, there's some other projects that are also deferred or off the table altogether. So there's probably a couple $1 million worth of projects that haven't actually happened in this financial year, so they haven't needed the borrowing. I know that some of the digital services stuff has been, oh no, it's gone over. I'll have to look into that one and come back to you. There's some timing.
So Amanda, that was a biggie for me that I'd highlighted as well on page 42. If I look at other borrowing, 2026 LTP 657, 2026 actual 6.6 million. So that was a $6 million uplift, and the explanation that we've got down below is the other borrowing has mainly been in relation to the transformation program and significant information technology improvements made alongside that project. So if we're not able to talk to that today, I definitely want to drill down further on that to get a better understanding, because those are big numbers, and we've talked in the past about being able to capitalise IT work, which Audit have already said in the past that they're uncomfortable with us doing. But my understanding was that there was also significant IT work that had been deferred into the 26-27 year, which we weren't able to capitalise. But there's still a really, really big number there under other costs, other borrowing.
Yeah, so in terms of the IT work, we still completed it. We haven't actually carried forward any of that into the 27 financial year, so there will be debt related to that. And I guess the operating deficit as well, we expected to make a profit, so there's probably some debt reduction in those ones that should have occurred in the operating budgets. Yeah, so I'll make a little reconciliation exactly what makes up that.
Thank you, but it does feel a lot like the lion's share of that $6 million of borrowing was for OPEX.
Couple of queries more than anything, Matt. On page 39, you talk on investments and other entities. I'm just wondering why we're buying shares in the Lower Waitaki Irrigation Company, and who are Civic Financial Services, and why are we buying into them?
Those are both before my time. We've had investments in them for a very, very long time, and they just sit at that value.
Paul, I think I've asked you before about the Civic Financial Services.
Yeah. So Civic Financial Services is the renamed, it was formerly called the Local Government Insurance Corporation, so LGIC. So every council, so that was a cooperative entity established well before the 89 reforms, and every council did a lot of their insurance through that grouping, and then when it was corporatised as part of the 89 reforms, every council got allocated some shares into that company based on the amount of insurance they'd had in the past. So that's why we still maintain those shares. The entity is still operating, mostly is now actually a superannuation provider, but does provide some liability insurance. And so the Lower Waitaki, we have shares in that entity because we need to be a shareholder to receive the raw water through the scheme. So that's our shareholding represents an allocation, and that will adjust over the next 12 to 18 months as they restructure with the redevelopment that they're doing.
And there's little or no risk associated with the shareholdings in those entities?
There's certainly no risk in the Civic. It's actually got net assets well in excess of sort of the shareholder funds. So if it was ever dissolved, we'd probably get a dividend, but that would mean sort of it's ceasing operations completely, which I think Council in the past has seen the value of it continuing as it is, as it operates. And then Lower Waitaki, there's really just the obligations that sit with all of the shareholders in that company that, I think is well understood, they're needing to undertake some redevelopments that Council will benefit from. So Council will make a direct contribution, but also will be liable for increased charges into the future as they provide a higher level of service.
Thank you. Sven?
No, according to the Treasury policy, we're reinvesting any surplus cash and also the reserves. So if we got 90.9 to the end of that quarter there of $1 million of debt, are we tracking if we add the internal debt to that as well? So if we've taken the reserves and used them to pay to keep the principal lower, have we got a figure for the total debt? As in, hypothetically, if we'd just taken all of our borrowing requirements and put them to the LGFA, what would the figure be? It might be something that needs some calculation, but I'd be interested in that figure at some point.
We don't have a separate internal debt. This is our debt picture. This is our full debt picture. So that's why there's those operating, our operating losses have been turned to debt as well. So it's the same thing. We're borrowing externally to pay our operating costs now.
But I understand that the reserves have been used as well.
It's hard to explain. Yeah, so that's how it's, the equity is like a balancing figure. You have your assets and your liabilities. So this is our liabilities, the borrowing, and then how it's recognised in reserves, some are over and some are under. But it's still, there's nothing more to add to that debt. That is our debt picture, the full 91.6.
Right, so it's just on a different spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's just how they're represented in the accounts. It's accounting thing. What reserves the money is in positive or negative and things like that. But yeah, it's represented by debt.
Graham, this accounting talk is exciting you.
Yeah, it's this is the overall debt picture, which I guess the questions that I have that may become a bit clearer. Well, I think we should be noting on page 46 the policy compliance, with the exception of the maturity profiles, which is to do with three waters, which is a bit of something that I'm seeing at a number of councils at the moment as they manage the coverage and the hedging and everything through, and the novation of debt across to the new entity. I will come back to that, but we should note the policy compliance there. I guess one thing that would be really useful in here, and we can perhaps take it offline, I can take it offline with Amanda, is seeing a projection forward over the LTP or the expected revisions to the LTP about what our debt profile is looking like in terms of the covenants, because we're going to have a fairly major rearrangement of our balance sheet coming, and projecting forward what's our position going to be post the Wisco transfer, and do we have a forthcoming issue potentially coming? Is it going to improve our headroom or not? And coming out of that, we'll be thinking about what the Wisco borrowing arrangements, because what I'm seeing with other LGFA at other councils is that there's a joint and several guarantee required from the shareholder councils to the to LGFA. Now, if we've got to factor in the chance that we would be the one that's attacked, if you like, in the event of a default, this may impact on the council's ability to borrow and utilise the headroom that we've got, which comes back to the fact then of thinking about that we're funding operating deficits out of borrowing, and our compliance with Section 100, 101 of the Local Government Act, and the ability to have a balanced budget, whatever that might mean. And that's about as broad as it is long there, but it's a real issue to look at. So I think at this stage we do need to be very mindful of what's happening, even if we don't know the exact numbers, to get a picture of what's happening with the Wisco. And I can certainly provide Amanda with some excerpts from other council papers and graphs that they're doing to assist with their provide. I believe the ones I'm thinking on were discussed in public, so I'll be able to provide them or direct Amanda to the right place to find them. And it's looking through this transition, that's a risk, is that we end up with having our facilities truncated in our ability to get on and do what we want to do in terms of long-term asset development. So, yeah, that would be something I probably need to take offline.
Thank you. And we discussed this yesterday, and I agree it would be a very useful picture to paint. So I think that's something that we'll try and get in for the next PAR and possibly circulate something in the interim.
I'll see if I can find something, Mr. Chair.
Amanda, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to assure people that the debt forecasts per the long-term plan are still quite consistent. So obviously our debt is sitting where we budgeted to be. It'll be very, very dependent on how much of the CapEx program we get completed this year. So our debt's supposed to increase to circa 130 million by the end of this time next year. And then once that happens, the majority, you can see the majority of that debt is waters related and it will transfer to the new entity. So then we expect our forecast to be as budgeted in the long-term plan, and we have just been through that process when we did the revised water services delivery plan and noted that it did end in that same sort of forecast. In terms of LGFA, so just to let you know that Southern Waters Limited is in the process of getting LGFA accession, so it can borrow from LGFA from 1 July 2027. We are not required to be a guaranteeing council as part of that process. There'll be documents and things that we'll need to fill out to help them join LGFA so they can borrow from LGFA, but this council is not required to be a guarantor. And then just to touch on as well, our operating deficits. Obviously, last year we spoke a lot about debt funding our operating deficits, and it's a no-no, it's not something we want to do. Given that our rates have been increased for this financial year, we are hopeful that we will not need to dip into to rate funding our operating deficits anymore. Obviously, these historic ones, somehow we're going to have to repay the debt associated with that, and we expect that there'll be an opportunity to do so once the Three Waters debt is gone on 1 July 2027. So we should be having a balanced budget from that point.
Thank you. We'll be keeping a good eye on that. John?
Yeah, thank you for all this, Amanda. So on page 42, you've got a graph that outlines the main borrowings we've been using. Property, including harbour, seems to be constant. Do you suspect that might even halve or go down by 2/3 now that those items that you've mentioned, as in the rec centre, the event centre and the forester and those big projects are completed, so the property thing should go back to a nominal number? And the second part of that is, with our overruns, as in the budgets, and I'm thinking of the property, Simon mentioned others, and the waste minimisation, comes to near enough to 13 million. So will that net itself off? So our bottom line for this year will be roughly what it should be, but the $13 million carryovers of projects, will that upset our budget for next year?
So this sort of debt level is only going to increase. So your parks and your property are probably pretty steady now. We don't have any big extra projects like the event centre or the gallery, but they're 20, 30-year assets that the debt's going to be over. So we're going to be slowly reducing that for the next 20 years. So it's going to kind of sit at that 13 million, 12 million sort of level. Waste management and minimisation, the big one there is Project Reclaim, which obviously doesn't have an operating return and income stream. So that's going to sit there for quite a while to be able to repay with surpluses. So we need this council to make surpluses going forward to be able to reduce these debt numbers. There'll be an opportunity to do so once we have more debt headroom, once Three Waters is gone. These are all conversations that you'll be having through the long-term plan. You need to decide whether you want to be a debt council, how fast you want to reduce that debt, whether it's okay, it's acceptable for it to sit there against the event centre, which is a 20 or 30-year asset, and have those future generations pay off that debt over the use of it. That'll be a conversation to have in the next few months as we start to prepare the long-term plan. But yeah, once Waters goes, debt is definitely a lot more manageable, but just bearing in mind that we don't have assets there that we can sell or that generate a high operating return to pay that debt down much faster.
So the 13 million of carryovers will disappear when Waters disappears too? Is that what you're saying?
The carry forwards, the bulk of it was Waters, so yes, any debt associated with that, the asset that we build and the debt that's paid for it will go to Southern Waters. And then the carry forwards, as I touched on before, like roading, we'll hold on to the roading and we'll hold on to the debt associated with that.
Thank you.
Mayor Mel.
Just having a look on page 42 here with our actuals under three waters at about 46 million in the LGFA funding. I'm guessing that's presumably all in the entirety will end up over in the Southern Waters space. So that you're talking about obviously coming down off our debt and that coming lesser. With that, does our debt cap drop down? Do we have, like I know that there's a big question mark on a lot of things, but do we have a bit of an indication of what that looks like?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but what is in the long-term plan is pretty accurate, and I think it was touched on in the Water Services Delivery Plan. But yeah, so everything that has, all the debt that has been used to build Water's assets will transfer with those Water's assets on 1 July 27. So that means, yeah, that the 46 million of Three Waters debt will be gone. So our debt will basically halve as if it was today. And then our headroom does decrease because it is based on our revenue. So it's our debt to revenue. And our Water's revenue is obviously going to leave as well. So that reduces our revenue. But we're in a lot better position. I can't remember off the top of my head what percentage-wise it is, but we're nowhere near our debt cap. Have a lot of, if you look at the graphs in the long-term plan, we have a lot of capacity over the following 8 years of the plan.
Maybe we can pull those back out and circulate them again because it picks up on what Graham was saying, and I can work with you offline to bring that back around. There was also lots of that work that Morris and Lowe did when we were going through all of the various iterations that showed it. But absolutely with LGFA, the amount you can borrow is based on the amount that you earn, and if you lose half your earnings, then you're going to significantly reduce your borrowings. Graham, did you have something?
No, I was just getting that graphic. Oh.
Dan.
Thanks, Simon, through the chair. Just confirming with regards to the LGFA accreditation for Southern Waters, that's so they can assume the debts, is that correct? Or is that for extra borrowing? I just want to make sure that ours moves first.
It'll be both. So they're set up as a borrower from LGFA. So from 1 July 2027, they'll be taking the assets and the debt associated with those assets from all four councils, us, Gore, Clutha and CODC. And so that'll start them off. And then as they need to carry on with their capital program, which is our capital program right now, they'll have to keep borrowing as well over future years.
Sven.
We've got a rough idea, back of the envelope idea of what our capacity to borrow might be, but I was wondering, do we have that for Southern Waters yet, or is it too early? Because there's a bigger picture here where essentially if you take the Waters plus the council, it's increasing the ability to borrow because there's such a big amount of work to do. I was wondering if we got any rough idea of what the upper limit of borrowing capacity will be for Southern Waters yet.
So Southern Waters itself, Waters CCOs have higher thresholds than us. So at the moment, you'll recall that our threshold is 175% debt to revenue. They can go to 500%. So yeah, and obviously they'll have the revenue streams from the four councils. So there's a lot of detail about that in the Water Services Delivery Plan, and there's a good website actually for Southern Waters Limited if anyone's interested. There's a lot of information in there. But yeah, the numbers are tight, not flash. You know, we've all seen through the Water Services Delivery Plan the increased revenue that they're going to need over the long term. Yeah, so it is well documented. They're recasting their forecasts at the moment. All four councils' numbers at the moment, and it's a moving beast all the time, and it really depends on how everyone performs this financial year, because obviously we've got a big capital program, and it'll depend on what we give them on 1 July 27. Yeah, there's probably not much else I can say at this point.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you for the wee reality check there, Amanda. It is scary that we have two entities that have huge borrowing capacity, but the ratepayer's got to pay both, and we never need to lose sight of that. But going back to Graham's, he mentioned on page 46, that's just for clarity because I'm a bit thick as far as it's concerned. So it says your bank facility headroom And loan deposits cash in the bank is 14.5. So, but in reality, it's only probably 3 with the stuff held for the LGNZ, and that is the facility of 10 million in that number. Is that what they're using? And the second part of that, it says the average cost of funds for easy working out is 4.5%, 4.47. When debt removes from this entity to the water entity, does that number change?
That's dependent on interest rates, the 4.47. So, yeah, I can't imagine it would change, like subject to interest rate changes. It'd be fairly consistent no matter what level of debt we've got.
Sorry, you carry on, John. I had a question off the back.
So I'm just looking at the repayments on the debt that on the borrowings we've had. Are there certain parts of that borrowing that are attributed to water, or does it come off the top or the bottom? Because that will, in effect, change our percentage of interest paid.
Yeah, so if you go back to there's a page that's, yeah. Yeah, so our GFA doesn't identify what of our debt is water related or non-water. We have a schedule internally that says that. So the ones that roll off in 2027 will be repaying, and then the new entity will be taking those on board. So you can note there's a variety of interest rates in there. So yeah, it's kind of depending on what happens on interest rates, what we need to reset out, what debt we take out in the next financial year for all our capital program on what will happen with our average interest rate. But yeah, basically all those ones that expire in 2027, we will repay in full, and then the new entity will take them out with whatever interest rates there are at that point in time. And then there might be some in here that we need to novate over to Southern Waters as well. So there's a process to work through. If they haven't matured yet, either we could repay them early, subject to break fees, or novate them over to be Southern Waters' responsibility. And I guess like you look at the May 28 ones, there's quite a variation in interest rates then. So there'll be a conversation to have with Southern Waters about what ones to take over and what the interest rate will be. But I'm guessing it'll just be our GFA's our weighted average interest rate at that time.
Well, my question was really complementary to John's. You know, we've got 10 million rolling off in September 26 at 2.87. Is the strategy behind that you go, oh gosh, we're in a high interest rate environment at the moment, so we'll fix that for 6 months, so then that will roll off and go across to the new entity. It feels like there's quite a conversation for us to have around this, not for this meeting, but yeah, it was just a really complimentary question to John's point, and I suspect, Graham, you've got something similar to add.
It's a bit of an interesting one because we're not identifying specifically which debt's coming. We've got a hard date, and we'll either have to align and do short-term cover to align up, or we'll have to get into novation, which may mean that we carry the debt, but there's back-to-back interest arrangements around. But if you generally look at the trends there, I suspect our average cost of borrowing is going to go up, because you look at the ones further out, it tends to be 4s and 5s, there's not that many 3s, whereas there's a lot of lower ones in this stuff that's rolling off. So we may be caught with a higher interest rate environment, to get back to the original question as to whether 4.47 is indicative going forward.
Or can you say you take the longer stuff because that's the stuff that we attributed to the debt? I mean, these are conversations for us.
Because there isn't matching, and we've got to cut it across. It's going to need to be sitting down, and it gets back to the discussion that I had before about guarantees. I was very pleased to hear that at the moment they're not looking at any guarantees coming from the shareholding councils, because that's not what I'm potentially hearing in other places. That's the point that I raised. So it's all up for negotiation and how it's going to happen. So it is a wee bit ready, fire, aim, the situation that we have. So we do need to be very cognizant of our debt profiling and going forward, and we may end up moving out of policy when we end up with some of the short-term stuff going through. We may be a little bit too exposed in terms of policy, and that's what's noted on the bottom left table on page 46, we've got a red flag there. And a lot of that is because of the fact of preparing for moving there, because the purpose of our policy is to stop us speculating.
Yeah, and to not have too much rolling off at the one point in time.
And not too many.
We've got a brief exposure here where we do have a greater amount than what we've got on policy rolling off at the point in time, but to the explanation that's provided, it's that's appropriate given that we're looking at novating a whole lot of assets across to somewhere else as well.
Which is why, as a committee, we should be noting the fact that we are in there and what the reason is. We're not just doing it because we're actually wanting to move into being speculators, which is the purpose of the two bands and the graphs on the next page, page 47, that we should be sitting within the bands.
Thank you. Any further, Franz?
Different subject. Event centre. I've heard of it mentioned today. I still have ingrained in my mind where we had 3.6 million last financial year coming into grounds that just disappeared, and then not even brought forward into this financial year. And I just wonder if there is an appetite. I'm not sure if this is for Amanda or in general, maybe Elisa. As in, can we have an update where we are with the event centre and how it is financed, and not only stage 1, but also stage 2? I clearly remember that we made a decision for the 500,000 from stage 1, and that was transferred to stage 2 under certain caveats, but it also included, as in, well, if we do that, then we can keep the contractor on site, and I doubt whether the contractor is still on site. All these things. So, and I'm not sure if this is for the park or whether that is for another, but I really would like to know, where are we with the event centre? Where are we with stage 1 as it is financed? And where are we with stage 2?
Amanda?
So I do have a bit of extra breakdown in the next paper, in the financial update, and I can provide more information there about where that's at.
Okay, so let's go to that next. And if there's still a lack of information for Councillor Shark, then we can look at where we go to off the back of that. Is there any further feedback on the Treasury report for now? No? If not, could I ask somebody move that we receive it, please? Moved by Councillor Thelning, seconded by Graham. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you, Amanda. And while you've got the microphone, we'll hand over for an update 5.5, the financial report for Q4 to 30 June.
Okay, so this is the same sort of picture that we've been looking at for at least the last 6 months. We've ended the year with a deficit of 3.35. Just to note that these are draft results. We still have quite a lot of work to do at 30 June. We quite pedantically go through all of our invoices that have come in that relate to assets and just make sure that they shouldn't be expenditure and vice versa. Make sure that they're all captured in the right financial year, whether it's 26 or a portion of it needs to be allocated into 27. So there's a bit of work to do, but right now it's sitting at $3.35 million deficit. The surplus was meant to be 8.56, so that's a difference of 11.9 million behind budget. Revenue, there's a lot of extra information there about the grants and stuff, as I just touched on, an extra table and a lot more detailed information about each specific project. Basically the deficit is due to not receiving as much grants and subsidies as we expected. There is some offsetting differences to that with the $1 million higher than budgeted dividend from Whitestone Contracting that we received earlier in June. In terms of expenditure, it's slightly under budget. There's a few offsetting variances within that, and again, I've put an extra table with a lot more line items showing a lot more detail of our other operating costs. The most significant variance to budget within that is contractor costs. So in line with our CapEx program, our operating contractor costs, repairs and maintenance is $3 million behind budget as well. And personnel costs, we've talked about before, exceeding budget. It's currently 1.49 million. That's another process we need to go through at 30 June just to work out exactly what we can Staff time we can capitalise as we capitalise assets. There is staff time that we can put to those. Where that asset hasn't eventuated at this time, it's deferred until 27. We won't be.
Question on that, Amanda, is that 1.49 as bad as it will be? So are we saying that at worst it's 1.49 over, but if we're able to capitalise some of the costs associated with spend, that number will drop down, it will not go up?
Yeah. I don't expect it'll go up. Yeah, there'll be some things that the auditors will challenge, but we'll push back on. So yeah, maybe at the final stages of the audit, there might be some where they come back and say, no, it should be expensed, you can't capitalise that. But yeah, I doubt it would be material enough for us to die in the ditch over.
Thank you. And I just have one more question before I hand it over to the rest of the committee. On page 52, we talk about user charges and the variance in user charges under budget by 1.67 million. We say that a key part of that variance is due to expecting slightly over $1 million in refuse disposal fees to fill the landfill up, but we only got 70,000 of that this year. How do we forecast that we're going to get $1 million and then only get 70,000?
So that was it's a one-off thing. So we are in the process of capping the, what's it called? Palmerston tip. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, and so there was, at the time of setting the budget, March, April last year, management were aware of some rubbish that could be, someone would pay us to put their rubbish in Palmerston before we put the cap on for once and for all. So that hasn't eventuated, it's still a work in progress.
Okay, so the rubbish is still out there and we might get the $1 million somewhere, but we won't because that landfill's been capped now. I just am trying to get in my head how we forecast that there's a potentially $1 million revenue opportunity and then it just sort of goes by the by and now we've got a landfill that's capped and we've missed it.
Yeah, it seems pretty certain when we set... Yeah, I can't remember the details of it. It seemed pretty certain when we set the budget. Potentially we might still get some in there. We haven't actually capped it yet. So yeah, we were hoping that we would get everything in we could, fill it as much as possible before it was capped, because once that process starts, you can't change it.
There's $1 million out there, let's get it and put it in. Sorry, France.
A bit of information on that. It is not correct, it's not yet capped. It's got to be kept, but there is also a lot of sludge still going to be put in there from the Palmerston wastewater plant. So yeah, I mean that's got to happen. Otherwise, where else are you going to go with it? So yeah, I'm keen to get $1 million, but you still got to finish the job first.
Absolutely, John.
Thank you for this. A lot of it's self-explanatory. You know, when things get tough, grants and subsidies that are government-driven seem to dry up, and people don't build houses and do everything else. So your expected fees get less. How much, Amanda, of the 12 million that we're under budget are we expecting to get back? And in saying that, I see you've said the Forester Gallery, we actually received those funds in the 2025 year. So what percentage sitting out there are we actually expected to receive from the government?
Okay, so in terms of all of that revenue, the roading side of it, it's either been deferred to the future years or it's not eventuating. The Forester Gallery, we've got the revenue that we were expecting, whether it be last year or this year. And then the Event Centre, there is 1.8 million to be received in future years, and there is 1.2 that we're still hopeful to receive for that project if it is required. If it's under budget, there is conversation to be had about what happens with that associated funding. So basically, in terms of the whole picture, the 1.8 is for the Event Centre, definitely contracted for future years, and other ones will eventuate, like the roading ones will eventuate when that program happens. But
and Forester Gallery is done and dusted.
Done and dusted.
Thank you.
Franz, do you want to pick up on the Network Waitaki stuff?
Yeah, look, I mean, thanks, Amanda, through the chair. As in, you know, that is some additional information that I read, but to me, there is too many, and excuse the expression, weasel words in there, as in, it just does not provide to me any clarity. A further 1.8 million is now a contract to be received in future years. This is still leaves 1.2 still expected of funding. To me, it comes across quite vague, as in, when is this going to be paid? Have we got certainty that we are going to get this funding? Where does that put us with stage 2? Don't forget that we made a decision on the $500,000 before we actually even thought about having rate rises, somewhere between 17 and 45%. All these things, and that I would like to get some more clarity on. And I don't want to preempt it, but if I had known that we are going to look for a 45 or up to a 45% rate rise, I probably would have thought different about the $500,000 that got referred to stage 2. And these sort of things I would like to get a bit more clarity on, please. Besides that, I got another question, but I'll let Amanda respond to that first. Or you.
So there is the paper that went to council in December about stage 2 that is still relevant. The numbers in there are still applicable. So the further 1.8 million is 100% contracted to be received in future years. There's underlying contracts and that's going to happen. The key one in that is the 1.25, the other 50% of the naming rights from Network Waitaki. And so that's got it's $127,000 per year for the next 8 years. And then there's some smaller ones, a couple of courts are paying 50 or 20 over the next few years. So yeah, the 1.8 is definitely happening, but some of it won't be received for up to eight further years. The 1.2 million still to be expected, which also represents the current underspend, that includes the 500K. So think of that as like the contingency. So if the project is under, or the project's, the next paragraph, is currently under budget by 1.55. So within that is the 500K contingency spend, which we're pretty sure that we're not going to use that whole 1.55 to complete the project. And so that 500K that we've promised for phase 2 is still there. And even if you took that 500 out, you'd still have $1 million underspend in the project as a whole, phase 1 and 2. But yeah, we still need to negotiate about the extra 1.245 of funding that was expected to bring us to the full project cost of 32 million. If the project is under by $1 million, say, then we don't need the funding of $1 million, but there's a conversation to have about how that goes towards phase 2, whether council needs to put anything whatsoever. Phase 2 is in the early stages right now, but in line with the resolutions that you touched on from December, council is not putting any funding towards that. They have full external funding for that, so we just need to negotiate about where that 500K contingency sits. But we will not be giving any extra cash to phase 2.
So my really simple this thing was supposed to be was budgeted to be $32 million. It's probably going to come in at about 30.5 million. So we've got 1.5 spare, but there was 1.25 of funding for that 32 million that was floating around there that still hasn't been done, but it might not ever be needed because it only cost 30.5, which means there's about 250,000 sort of, there should be about 250,000 of cash somewhere that could go towards phase 2, but it's not going to come out of the council's pocket. It needs to come out of the funding pocket.
Yep.
I think everybody's just worried that council might be being expected to put some money into a phase 2 when we haven't tidied away phase 1 yet.
I think our resolution from December is pretty clear that council is not putting any funding into phase 2 other than the 500 contingency. So if we're at least 500 under in phase 1, then that 500 that's not spent in phase 1 will be put towards phase 2. The second part of that resolution was very clear that that's subject to receiving the full funding of phase 1. So obviously we need to receive the funding to give the 500. So council won't be paying anything without that happening. Something else I was going to touch on. As part of the 1.245 of funding still expected, there's 2 courts still, and they're 200k each. So that's 400 that we would hope that, there's 2 sponsorships that are up for grabs there. So that's an extra 400k that should be going towards phase 1, regardless of how the costs end up.
Thank you. Sorry, with the continued questions, but Rebecca and then Dan.
Thank you. Just on those 2 court sponsorships, and if the project comes under budget as anticipated, are there any opportunities there to use that sponsorship funding to offset the operational costs ongoing and reduce, therefore, the ongoing ratepayer contribution to the facility?
I think there should be. Sponsorship and naming rights should typically, accounting-wise, go towards covering your operating costs over the life of the project. I guess that'll be something to negotiate with the person that signs up to the courts and also the Event Centre Trust.
And Dan, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, through the chair. It follows on from what Deputy Mayor Ryan was just talking about in some respects, but with regards to the original agreement was 10 million was rates funded, 5.6 million was actually agreed to be not rates funded. Is any of that money ring-fenced to either go to the non-rates funded element or the rates funded element? That money coming in from those additional sponsorships and things?
No, so that's unrelated. The additional sponsorships, that's the Trust's share of funding, the 17 million that they needed to get. So our 10 million debt funding was black and white. There's 600k of depreciation funding, which happened straight away. That's black and white. And then the extra 5 million of non-rates payer funding, we are still to fully fund that. At the moment, a portion of it is debt funded. We used the RMA reserve last year, and we were hoping to sell surplus land. We consulted on that through the long-term plan, so hopefully those other income streams will go towards that extra 5 million. But in no way are we relying on grants and donations for that extra 5 million.
Okay, I guess part of it is if there is an underspend, as we're expecting, does that come off the $5 million element of it, as opposed to the other part of our budget?
I think that's something we'll have to keep talking to the Trust about. It's not black and white. So when we had the resolutions in December, it was quite clear that any unused contingency to go towards phase 2 would still be subject to us receiving all of the funding. So whether that means if there's $1 million less that we actually need, whether that comes off our 15 million effectively, or whether it comes off the 17 million required grants funding. So that's a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
Either way, it's community funding.
Yes, but if we were to get, what about we'd be able to put that into something else in the community potentially? Franz?
Yeah, I mean, just also for clarification, I understand that all the money for the event sector is coming, but I think a key point is also when. And if we know that, then I think we can rest a little bit assured so we don't get a surprise. Oh, sorry, in April, as in 3.6 million, we expect that it's not going to happen now, and all of a sudden we turn a big deficit. For our prudent financial planning, surely we need to know when is this money coming over the years. But I'll leave it at that. Well,
I think to Amanda's point, we're pretty clear on where a lot of that money, when a lot of that money is coming in now, and unfortunately, some of it's going to come in over the next 10 years rather than coming on year 1.
Yeah, but that's okay. At least we can put it in our plan. We don't like these nasty surprises at all, because we have to explain it to the people that have elected us around the table. On that subject, a little bit, Amanda, if you don't mind, through the chair, page 52, that statement of comprehensive revenue expensive. Assets vested in council, that last line, Do I understand this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that is a cost code or a line for any assets that get sold? And if yes, then I've got a follow-up question on that.
The assets that get sold, the surplus land and things that we consulted on in the long-term plan are further down in expenditure. It's a negative expenditure, non-trading losses, gains. So that 472 there contains 500k of sale of surplus land each year of the long-term plan. Assets vested in council are largely where there has been some development, and it's the roading and Three Waters infrastructure that a developer will often vest in council once all the lots and everything is sold and it's all set up. They don't want the ongoing maintenance of that, and typically it gets vested in council. There can be some ad hoc community sort of assets. If a community group closes down or something like that, they can vest assets in a building that has no value or things like that can get vested in council as well. It jumps around that amount. I think back in 24 it was 574. Last year it was 88, so it's quite hard to budget. We kind of just sit at around the 500k level.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I've got a few comments. So on page, now I've lost it. Sorry, bear with me. It's the commentary on the overspend on the wages, which is near enough to 1.5 million, and that explanatory is that's on page 54, and that's explanatory. I take that on board. I have two comments to make on that though. You mentioned that a large portion of the capital works project and staff time is put against that. We have to be very careful that we don't use that as an out for overrun. So I think that's got to be looked at very carefully. And the second part of that is, I noticed further down, consultants are $2.5 million. And to me, if you're going to have a wage bill, that number, you have one or the other, but you don't have both. So I know that's easy to say, but
I think it's really important that we see them split out, but also that we talk about it as a collective, as a sum.
Yeah. So and as far as the investment property goes, what happens to those funds, Amanda, when they come through? And I know you put it as a loss against the other. So do they go off to debt, or they just disappear in the big numbers?
Where are you talking about the investment property?
Sorry, that's page. Franz asked the question. It's page. Now I've lost that too. Yeah, whatever Franz was talking about before, where it comes down on the bottom of it, comes as a liability.
The vested.
So where you've got negative expenditure.
Yes.
So it's
Yes. 52. Yes. 52.
It's actually revenue. The 472. It's a negative expense, so that means it's revenue. So yeah, where we sell property, surplus property. First, we will take off any loans that are on it, or anything, operating deficits and things like that. And so then, yeah, the net profit that we get from it goes into that line, the gains. So it's the net of it. And then in terms of contracted consultants, the top 40 suppliers and public excluded gives a really good breakdown of exactly what we've spent them on, and hopefully you can see how valid they are. And they're spread quite a lot around quite a few different departments.
All right, one last. You got more? Okay.
So the funds, I know that comes through, as you say, it's a net figure. What happens to that figure? Does it go through and pay off debt, or does it go back to the property division, or for those sales? I'm trying to work out where the cash goes to, if it's net. And the second part of the other piece was on page 56. Do those revaluations do us any favours, or are they actually a nuisance?
So yeah, in terms of selling the property, it will go into our bank account, and if there is debt related on it, it will reduce the debt as well. So whenever we need to borrow next time, we don't actually pay off debt to LGFA, we just need to borrow less for our other things going on around council. And in terms of revaluations, There's pros and cons for revaluations. I think it's important to recognise exactly what your assets are worth at any point in time. I know our assets like our roading and waters, we can't sell them. We can't get much of a return on them. But to recognise what they're truly worth, what we're actually paying to keep them up to scratch or to replace them is quite important, because that also makes sure that we put enough depreciation funding aside to keep up with that over its life, and recognising the true cost of them. So it's important so that the whole accounts balance out. You've got the debt of building the water and the roading infrastructure, so therefore it is important to recognise them at their true value at any point in time as well.
All right, Paul, you've got a supplementary to that, and then we'll go to Sven, and then I'm keen to wrap this one up.
And I appreciate that. No, just there is one aspect of the consultants that we can sort of talk about in public, and that was the spending we needed to undertake in relation to developing the second version of the water service delivery plan. So that pretty much explains all of the overrun, and we're currently working through the process of claiming those costs against the Better Off funding, which you'll note up in the grants area that's a bit behind budget at the moment, and we're looking basically in the claiming process for that at the moment. So that's one that we could sort of cover off in here.
Yeah. But as we discussed before, we could have a head start consultant spend that pops in here that we hadn't budgeted for, that's going to rear its ugly head as well. Sven, and yes, I do see you've got your hand up, so I will come to you afterwards.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because we're looking at the bigger picture and we're taking a lot of uncontrollable debt, it seems, between us and Southern Waters, and as Amanda said before, we need to make surpluses to start paying them down, but this coming year we're forecasting or planning actually to make a loss and borrow money for operational and various other red flags, and then hopefully return to a surplus the following year as per the LTP at the moment. So next year's budgeted deficit is about 1.3, and then I guess my question is, by the Q1 report next time we meet, will we have an idea of the impact of the higher interest rates, the continued Strait of Hormuz issue, and the weather events that we've had that are all going to probably impact on our next deficit?
Yeah, we'll see all that come through. The next report will be up to 30 September, so that'll be presented in October. And yeah, I think going forward it'll be quite helpful. This financial year, we're always going to have to keep on the same page with Southern Waters about what our assets value, our CapEx program and their related debt are at any point in time. They're going through a revaluation of those assets at the moment as well. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and we should always keep on the same page, so I can start to split it out a bit clearer maybe with the current result, and also show more forecasts of what it's going to look like for 1 July 27.
Franz?
I do apologise. I just start again, page 54, second bullet point, the line additional roles then budgeted. What is the process for our organisation to take on extra staff?
So I don't think that's a question that Amanda or Paul can answer, but I will take it upon myself to come back to you and the rest of the committee with a definition of what that process is and how it's currently happening.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. That was very thorough, and we really went down some good spaces there. Could I ask somebody, if there's no further questions, moved by Councillor McCone, seconded by Councillor Schlark. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried. That brings us to the end of the public forum, and so I'd like to thank all of those online for attending and giving up your time to join us, and ask for someone now that to move that we go into public excluded, moved by Councillor Lewis, is seconded by Councillor Schmeling. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried, and thank you again for all of you online.